Over the past few years, I've completely transformed my life. Not through one big overnight shift, but through small consistent habits that added up over time. I went from eating mostly junk food and never cooking to eating whole nourishing meals every day. I went from a screen time of 9 hours a day on my phone to now barely even hitting 1 hour a day. I went from always wasting my time with distractions to now filling it up with meaningful activities like reading or journaling, learning a new skill, spending time with my family, yoga, exercise. And honestly, I can confidently say that my mental health, my self-esteem, my confidence has dramatically improved. But here's the thing. Change didn't just happen overnight, and along the way I made tons of mistakes. And so if you've ever felt like building new habits feels impossible or you keep failing so many times, trust me, you're not alone. I have been there and I understand. And so in this video, I want to share with you my 3 biggest habit building mistakes that made my journey so much harder than it needed to be, so that you don't have to repeat them and can start to build habits that actually last. So the first mistake is trying to change everything overnight. I wasted so many years because for so long I expected myself to just turn into my dream person overnight. And I would make these crazy goals or make this schedule of getting up early in the morning, then doing some journaling, then going for a walk, then trying to study for 1 hour, trying to reduce my screen time by like 3 hours. Often within a few days I would burn out and I would be right back where I started, feeling like a failure. And it was because I didn't understand the process of real change, which requires 3 things: consistency, patience, and steady effort. Most people tend to prioritize intensity over consistency. This is why New Year's resolutions often don't work. People set the goal that they're going to go to the gym, they're going to lose weight, and they try and push themselves so hard. They try and go to the gym 5 times a week. They try and uphold their whole diet and just go on shakes or smoothies or salads or fasting until midday. And it's because they're prioritizing intensity because they're trying to get quick results. They're attached to the outcome instead of focusing on the process. All this does is burn you out in the long run because you're not actually focused on habit building, but you're focused on your results. Just think about it this way. The guy who runs in the race, who is way slower but remains consistent, is going to outrun the person who sprints but then burns out. We often associate doing more with being better. If I go to the gym for 2 hours, well, that's way better than doing a 20-minute workout. Or if I meditate for half an hour, that's way better than doing 5 minutes, right? But actually, sometimes the smarter thing is to do less, because if you can't remain consistent, and just think about something that you've tried to change, right? Maybe it's your screen time, maybe it's going to the gym, maybe it's changing your diet, whatever it is. If you can't remain consistent, it's a sign that you're trying to do too much at once. The person who is able to remain consistent will outwork everybody else who's trying to get fast results, who's trying to push themselves so hard, yet they burn out and they can't keep going. And so if I could go back and speak to my younger self, I would tell her to pick one area of her life and put her focus in that area. Let's say your diet. Put all of your energy and attention into improving your diet and don't be worrying about trying to change everything else right now. Because what naturally happens is that when you focus on one area and you start to see small improvements and progress over time, you start to gain confidence in yourself. So let's say, for example, for 1 month I'm working on my diet, and by the end of the month I've really started to feel confident in myself. I'm sticking to it, I'm remaining consistent, and so now I start to feel a bit of self-belief. I'm thinking to myself, look what I've done for 1 month. That was really hard, but I've managed to change these things. I've managed to start cooking, I've managed to meal prep a bit for work, and now I start to feel a bit of self-belief, a bit of confidence, and then this confidence and this self-belief gives me the strength to then tackle my next habit. Okay, now I want to focus on my screen time. Okay, now I need to put my energy and attention here, and I already feel good going into it because I've already got a win, because I've been working on my diet, I've been remaining consistent, and so that strength helps me to then tackle the next one. And so in my opinion, it's best to choose one area to focus on, give all of your energy to that, and try and remain consistent. That is the goal. Consistency beats intensity. The second biggest mistake I made was not realizing that failures are part of the process. Honestly, you're probably gonna fail quite a few times until you make your habit stick for good. This is just the nature of what is gonna happen when you're doing something new and you're trying to do something uncomfortable. Success isn't just like this linear path where everything is just like an easy step by step. No, there's going to be obstacles along the way. There's going to be barriers along the way, and you're going to fail sometimes. And I really think people don't understand this. They expect for things to just stick the first time, or even if they fail a few times, they get so discouraged and they think that they're then stuck that way. But failure is part of the process because this is how you learn what works and what doesn't. And something I've really learned through reading books and following other people and learning from people who are doing better than me is that the only difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that the successful people try again. That's the only difference. They have failed exactly the same amount of times as the unsuccessful people, but they still get back up and they try again. And of course, it can feel discouraging, but you have to have this mindset of I'm going to keep trying until I succeed. And so if I could give 2 vital tips for this section, it would be self-reflection and self-compassion. The truth is, so many people fail, but then they don't take the time to reflect on why. They don't take the time to reflect on what happened to make them fail, and so then they just keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. Let's take the example of someone trying to reduce their screen time. They set the goal that tomorrow they're not going to scroll for the evening, but it ends up happening. They end up scrolling all evening, but then all they think to themselves is, oh look, I'm a failure, I can't do it, it didn't work, and then they just continue distracting themselves. But that's not going to help them to learn what actually happened. Why did I start scrolling? How am I feeling? Was it because I was bored? Was it because I was lonely? Was it because something happened? Was I out for the day and someone said something to me? Did my mom say something to me that upset me? What triggered me to want to scroll? We don't do this. We don't self-reflect. And so because of that, we keep missing the lessons. We keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. You have to start asking yourself questions, and from a place of curiosity, not from a place of judgment, which is what we're going to go on to next, which is self-compassion. Because so many studies and research show that talking to yourself in a negative way, talking to yourself with an inner critic, trying to put yourself down, oh, I failed scrolling on my phone, I'm a loser, look, I'm a failure, look how stupid I am. That is not going to help you to make a change. And I know how hard this is to change because unfortunately many of us have this inner critic inside, right? We speak to ourselves in such a negative way. We beat ourselves up when something goes wrong. And this in itself is another toxic pattern or habit that you also have to try and unlearn, because it's not going to help you to succeed in with whatever it is you're trying to succeed in, with whatever habit you're trying to build. You need to also start unlearning the pattern of talking to yourself in such a negative way. And I totally get how hard it is to change, because for most of my life I talked to myself in such a negative way. I had such a bully in my head, and so it took a long time to start unlearning that. It took a long time to catch myself when I spoke to myself in that way and question it, and then try and use a different phrase and try and be like, no, I'm not going to speak to myself like that. Just imagine, right, that your friend is trying to do something difficult. Maybe they're trying to stop ultra-processed food because they're trying to look after themselves more. And imagine that they stumble one day and they end up binging on food, right? Imagine if someone was on the sideline telling them, you're a loser, you're a failure, look at you, you're stupid. How do you think that friend is going to feel? They're going to feel so discouraged. They're going to feel so bad about themselves. And so then they go back into the cycle. They feel so bad about themselves. They feel so discouraged. And so then that makes them want to eat more because they're trying to escape that feeling. Whereas if someone was to be encouraging and be like, look, okay, this thing happened. Yeah, it wasn't ideal. For whatever reason you stumbled. Let's self-reflect. What happened? Why did you feel the urge to binge on that food? What happened in that moment? What were you thinking about? Okay, next time, what could we do better? How can we make a little bit of a plan so that we can do better? I'm not saying that you have to pretend everything is sunshine and rainbows and tell yourself in the mirror that you're the most beautiful person on the planet, but all it is removing the toxic negativity that you keep on speaking to yourself in. And yes, it takes conscious effort. This isn't just something that you're like, okay, I'll speak good to myself and it's gonna happen. No, that's not going to happen. You have to put in the effort. This is why making a change in a certain area of our life is so hard, because not only are you on the process of trying to build the habit, but you also have to deal with all of these little things, right? When you fail, then you have to deal with how you talk to yourself. You then have to unlearn this negative habit. And so there's loads of things that we don't take into account. This is why change takes time. This is why it requires patience and steady effort. And so start making time for self-reflection, inquiring, why do I feel this way? Why did I act like that? And also the self-compassion. And if I could give you a tip, it would be that when you fail or when something happens, pretend that you're talking to a friend. What would you say to a friend in that same situation? How would you talk to them? How would you encourage them? And start trying to practice talking to yourself that way. And yes, at first it might feel cringy, it might feel uncomfortable, but over time, as you keep on practicing, it is going to get easier, I promise. And so those two things are going to really help you, and just accepting that failures are part of the process. As long as you are learning, as long as you are trying, then you are still in the game, so do not give up. The third mistake is not prioritizing self-education. I personally believe that the biggest reason I was able to make such a shift in my life is because I started to prioritize self-education. Phone usage, social media, ultra-processed food, having a sedentary lifestyle. I've read so many books on these topics and listened to so many podcasts of experts speaking, and so I'm very, very aware of the science and the impacts these things have on my body and my mind. I always like to say the phrase, there is a big, big difference between knowing something and understanding something. We all know that eating junk food isn't good for us. We all know that we should be getting more sleep. We all know that we should be getting more exercise. But do you truly understand why? Do you truly understand what those foods are doing to your body, like on a cellular level, on a brain chemical level? Do you truly understand the impacts that social media is having on your mind? And I'm not talking about just a quick Google search and, oh, look, this is the reasons why. I'm talking about doing some deep research, reading about these things so you truly understand them. The truth is, we live in a very sick society where it's becoming normal to have depression or have an illness or have obesity or have anxiety. Everywhere you look, everyone you know has some sort of illness. They're sick. We've been conditioned to see these behaviors as normal. Yeah, eating junk food every day is fine. Yes, binge drinking on the weekend until you blackout drunk is so normal. Oh, you have a screen time of 5 hours a day? Well, look, that person has a screen time of 13 hours, so actually your screen time is really, really good. And everyone around you has a screen time of 5 hours a day, so it's normal, right? This is just how we live. This is just how life is. No, those aren't normal behaviors, and they're signs of bad mental health. And personally, one of the biggest reasons I was able to break these negative habits is because I truly understand the impact that they're having on me. I understand how negative they are, and so I don't see them as a positive thing to do. Honestly, the last time I scrolled on my phone would have been like over a year ago, and that would have been only for like 10 minutes. And when I decided to break my phone addiction, I didn't just tell myself, oh, I'm gonna break my phone addiction. I literally read like 4 books on the topic. I listened to podcasts on the topic, and so it made it so much easier for me to stop because I started to really realize and understand the impacts that it was having on me. And so you have to educate. It's not enough to just say to yourself, this is bad, I'm gonna stop. If you're watching this video or you have a device to go online, there's no excuse to not be able to educate yourself because it's so much of it is for free. Educate. Knowledge is power. Click here to learn how overstimulation is ruining your life, and I hope this video helped you. All the best.